Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 5th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dow, and I'll be serving as your host. And let me take this opportunity to wish you each a happy, prosperous, and fulfilling 2026. As we start every program, and certainly as we start this new year, thank you so very much for being a part of this evening's program. Whether you're looking at us on GBN Television, listening on GBN Radio, or tuned in on any of our social media platforms, we thank you because your presence is what makes these programs meaningful. Speaking of making the program meaningful, we are able to start this year as we have started the last 3 years with the Prime Minister of Grenada, Honorable Dickon Mitchell. Prime Minister, welcome again to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you, Colin. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to say good evening to the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique who are physically in Grenada and in the diaspora. It's a pleasure to be on Beyond the Headlines in 2026. Happy New Year to everyone. I certainly want to wish all of us good health. And as I heard in church on New Year's Day, if you have good health, then the wealth will follow.
All right. Well, we're all hopeful, but I have been this year wishing, good health, happiness, and progress. I don't know why that word has come to mind and just has been resonating, but I certainly wish us all, and certainly you in your role, a progressive 2026.
Well, thank you. I certainly look forward to that.
Excellent. Prime Minister, there are lots of things that we can talk about. This start of year program typically does some reflections on the previous year and projections. But as you know, we have had some developments over the weekend. So on Saturday, we got the news that the U.S. government went into Venezuela. There was the extraction of President Maduro. And we'd just like to hear from you, what is your government's response to this news?
Well, I think first of all, the focus has been on the extraction of President Maduro, but I think it's important for us to appreciate that people died on the weekend, and the reports coming out of Venezuela indicate that as many as 80 persons probably lost their lives, many of whom are Venezuelan citizens. The reports indicate that as many as possibly 32 Cuban nationals also lost their lives. So I want to start off by expressing on behalf of the government and people of Grenada our condolences to the government and people of Venezuela and the government and people of Cuba on the loss of life and the damage to property that has occurred. We have for many months now been reiterating on the need to keep the region stable, to keep the region peaceful, and to emphasize that whatever challenges or differences countries may have internally or between countries, that it is important for us to use diplomacy to resolve those challenges or to narrow the issues and the differences and to keep working at it no matter how intractable and how difficult the challenge or the challenges are. And I think the weekend's events from where we sit in Grenada have not advanced the causes of any of the parties and has not narrowed the differences of any of the parties, and if ever, is pushing the region into more instability, the likelihood of greater erosion of trust, both domestically, internally, and externally. And so we again reiterate our position that diplomacy, dialogue, negotiation, and compromise are the only means for achieving any sustainable long-term resolution to the differences. And we wish to again urge all parties to respect international norms, the rules of international engagement, the respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our countries in the Western Hemisphere and the Americas, and that is the only way in which we will make progress on the issues whenever differences may arise between groups within countries or amongst countries.
Right. We heard President Trump talking about we'll be running the country. What is your response to that type of terminology, especially since you just referenced the importance of respect for sovereignty?
I don't know if I have a response to that. The only way a country can run another country, well, let me put this way, a country runs its own country. And the only way you can run another country is if the territory belongs to that country or is a colony of that country. So I really think the question may have to be directed at President Trump and his team as to what they mean by that.
But there's been some attempt at clarifications. Secretary of State Rubio making the rounds on the Sunday morning talk shows in the U.S. talk about running the country means running the policies. Is there a distinction without a difference?
I mean, to be honest, I'm being frank. I'm not able to explain or understand, and so I'm not going to pretend that I can explain or understand those statements. I think really it is for the officials in the U.S. government to explain what they mean by those statements, so I'm not in a position really to comment on what it means.
As an attorney at law, what your impression of the extraction, would you say it was a violation of international law?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I think there are other examples involving the United States and other presidents of other Latin American countries where allegations have been made that they've been involved in drug running, where a normal, customary, legal process was used to get them to the United States and to try them in the United States, to convict them in the United States, and then to pardon them in the United States. So I don't need to, I think, say anything further on that.
Okay. We have heard Prime Ministers Gaston Brown and early on this morning Roosevelt Skerrit saying that Antigua and Dominica both agreed to accept deportees from third countries coming from the U.S. Has such a request been made of Grenada?
Well, I need to clarify. I haven't heard what you've heard. Okay. So I haven't heard either of the Prime Ministers, so I'm not in a position to say that they've said that, so I want to clarify that. What I can say to you is that for some time now, the U.S. government has approached Caribbean countries, including Grenada, to enter into a memorandum of understanding pertaining to third country nationals as to whether the countries will be prepared to, if asked by the U.S., and if the country agrees to, on individual cases, to agree to hosting. We've been in discussions with the United States on this, and the discussions ongoing. Texts of the MOU have been shared, and the various technical people, Office of the Attorney General's, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have been in discussions with the U.S. Embassy as well as our embassy in Washington on the matter. Okay.
So to date, we have not agreed to accept third. That's okay. Yes. We also heard, and I heard, Prime Minister Gaston Brown announcing the cancellation of the Cuban brigades. Is this something that Grenada is also contemplating?
Well, again, I didn't hear that. I've just seen media reports about it, and I don't know what's the state of the situation in Antigua. Our position and the current situation with the Cuban medical personnel, doctors, nurses, and other biomedical technical persons who've been here, these arrangements remain in place. If we cancelled those arrangements abruptly, we risk, to use the Grenadian term, cutting off our nose to spoil our face. There are certain areas of the services provided by these Cuban nationals that only they provide, meaning we do not have any domestic or Grenadian or regional support in those areas. We have certainly been, over the last several years, seeking to strengthen our capacity in the healthcare sector. We've also sought to diversify our reliance on other countries for support. So, for example, you would have heard the announcement that we've agreed with Ghana to bring in nurses, Nigeria to bring in doctors. You are very well aware that we've negotiated with St. George's University to get as many as 30 medical scholarships this year, so that we can begin to seriously bolster the capacity deficits we have. You're probably also aware that we are certainly going to be going after our SGU alumni to help us, both Grenadians proper and those who are non-Grenadians, to help us address the significant HR deficits that we have in healthcare. So that's really our focus. I can't speak to the motives or reasons or intentions behind decisions of other countries. It's also important to emphasize that the arrangement with what is called the Cuban Medical Brigade is an arrangement with the Cuban government. Outside of this, there are significant Cuban-born nationals working in their private capacity individually in Grenada, both with the government and the private medical sector on their own, providing service. So it's also important for us to emphasize this fact as well. And as we look forward to Project Polaris, and as we look forward to strengthening the quality of care and service we deliver in the healthcare sector, we expect that we will end up with a fairly highly diversified healthcare workforce to support the ambitions that we have for the healthcare sector.
Okay. I just want to belabor a little bit, I'm going to use that term, the tensions in the region. Back in October, the head of the Southern Command, this was Admiral Alvin Hosley, had a well-publicized sojourn through the region. In December, a senior advisor of what is now referred to as the Department of War visited Grenada, and there was much less publicity. What was the impetus for this visit?
Well, again, sometimes I probably need to say you're asking the wrong person the questions. I can't tell you the reason, the impetus for the visit in the sense of from the U.S. perspective. Obviously, a request was made for us to, I should emphasize, both in the case of Admiral Hosley, I think it is, and in the case of the more recent visit, I was not present at the time, and so I personally did not meet with any of the gentlemen. So I could only say, based on the brief I got from Grenadian officials who attended the meeting, Commissioner of Police, National Security Advisor, Foreign Minister, etc., that the general discussions focused around, as you probably aware, the Americans have published, I think, what is the sort of national security strategic paper. And it was essentially to provide a brief of what they view or see that, and to provide an explanation of that, and to a large extent that's what the conversation focused on.
Okay. We've seen visa restrictions imposed on a number of the OECS territories, and one of the things that have been cited was the CBI programs. Grenada, like the other OECS countries, signed on to an agreed framework in terms of how the oversight of the CBI program will take place, but yet we were not cited. Why are we getting special treatment?
I keep saying your questions are directed to the wrong person. I don't know that we're getting special treatment. That's the first thing. And again, we have to emphasize that American policies for American policymakers, and how they make the policy really is a matter that I can't speak to, nor do I really wish to speak to be frank. I think what we can speak to is Grenadian policy, and in instances where there's regional consensus on a particular policy, regional consensus. I can certainly speak to the CBI program in Grenada and in the region. I could speak to the fact that we've made significant strides to continue strengthening the programs, strengthening oversight, strengthening due diligence, strengthening the standards that we have for screening and vetting of applicants, strengthening the transparency. That is why we were readily able to agree to the 6 principles back 2 years ago with the United States. That has formed the foundation for us to deepen cooperation and collaboration, not just with the United States, but with the United Kingdom and the European Commission as well, and countries within that that framework. And that is why we've been able to agree and pass legislation on having a regional regulator. The regulator is going to be set up and housed in Grenada. The central bankers and the OECS Commission Secretariat has been key partners supporting us in this, together with the US, the UK, and the EU. And so we will continue along that line. I think we all have to recognize that, in a sense, this administration in the US probably has a more aggressive approach in terms of how they treat with various policy initiatives with their friends and foe alike. And so, as I said, I'm not in a position to speak to their thinking, and nor can I speak to whether or not, simply because I can give you an example. Which was the first country that was sanctioned on visa issues? Is Grenada.
Correct.
The visa of the Minister of Finance was cancelled, together with other parties.
Has that been reinstated?
No, it has not been reinstated. Okay. You could have asked Dominica and St. Lucia and St. Vincent why they were getting special treatment then.
No, and the question is just this. There was a first strike on Grenada. We're very similar in respects to the CBI. There was these meetings held, and hence the question arose, did Grenada agree to something ahead of Antigua and Dominica now coming on board, whether it's the acceptance of third parties, etc.?
I'm saying, that's the point I'm making. I'm saying U.S. policy and the enactment of U.S. policies for the U.S. And I can't speak to what their thinking is in terms of how they treat other countries. At best, if they convey to Grenada their thinking on any particular matter peculiar to Grenada, then I can speak to it, but I'm not in a position to speculate as to what's going on with Antigua and Dominica.
Let's deal with the particular issue for Grenada then, the radar. Mm-hmm. I know that it was announced, the request was made, it was being reviewed. President Trump, in his press conference on Saturday, spoke of the possibility of a second wave. So is that radar question still relevant? And if yes, where are we with the review?
We're still conducting the review. I think people need to appreciate that, and I've said this repeatedly, we have a civilian airport that was not designed for any military installation. Grenada doesn't have a military. So routine, if I may call, law enforcement cooperation, Coast Guard, RSS, etc., are things that we would use that word routinely partner with the United States. A request to host military stuff introduces a whole new ball game, and for an airport that is already cramped for space, that already has challenges with ensuring that we meet the FAA guidelines in terms of distance from the runway, you would appreciate that we are very much locked in. We're extremely close to St. George's University. We're extremely close to buildings on either side of the runway. We literally, it's a narrow tip of a peninsula. We have no space. So issues of safety, issues of the impact on the airport, all of those things have to be carefully considered. The type of radar, what impact it has on safety and navigation, etc. All of those things are things that has to be considered. In some instances, we've had to rely on the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority to provide feedback, and the NTRC to provide feedback. These are technical things that I'm not in a position to advise myself on. So sometimes if a request is sent or information is sent, you have to send to someone else, they have to study, they have to come back to you, and so on. And sometimes there's lulls in the communication and so on, and that is part of what has happened. So that's just purely on the technical side. I mean, obviously, then on the diplomatic, a larger scale, there are other considerations that we'd have had to consider. Okay, what is the legal basis? What happens if something happens? How many personnel are coming? What is their status when they are they civilian? Are they military? Are they law enforcement? What happens if something happens between them and a Grenadian civilian? If they're in a hotel or something, and God forbid there's some altercation or incident, all those things have to be understood. If we got to the point where we couldn't do it, and would have to be written down, legal agreements would have to be signed up, and so on. So this is not some simple run-of-the-mill stuff, because we essentially have no framework for this. A lot of the other law enforcement type requests, we have frameworks in place for treating with. So it is both technical issues, it is both also legal issues that we would have had. I get the impression that people seem to be anxious or impatient over the matter, which is baffling to me. and that's just on that. And then there would have been also, certainly from a legal perspective, okay, even if it was what is it being used for, right? Again, as I said, we have no military. You've heard me start off by talking about the zone of peace. We certainly have no difficulty in supporting law enforcement measures. It's a completely different issue here if we're talking military action, provoked or unprovoked. Because I can on the one hand be saying we promoting zone of peace diplomacy, and on the other hand I'm saying a country that doesn't have a military then begins the process of saying, okay, we can be militarized without understanding the consequences of your principle versus your action. So these are not simple matters that you wake up, have a dream about and decide, okay, I found the answer, right? And then I think crucially and probably finally, the voice of the people on a matter of this importance would obviously have to be heard and taken into consideration and deliberated on. I think you saw that there's been significant debate and demonstrations and all kinds of things about the matter just because we said we were considering it, right? So again, those things would have had to be factored. So in a sense, the request is still a live request. And I think I've kind of said where we are in terms of my answer to the question.
If I'm to close off on this, have you had any contact? Because I noticed you mentioned conflict within countries and conflict between countries. Have we had any contact with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago recently, especially given her being an outlier, more or less, in this intervention by the United States in the region over the last couple of months?
Well, I don't know if she's an outlier. I'm not so sure I agree with that assessment. And when you say contact in relation to...
Just in terms of regional relations, Prime Minister to Prime Minister, we are the closest nation to Trinidad and Tobago, and there's been lots of things being said about CARICOM and relations among CARICOM.
Those issues, you see, people have to understand that we live in an age where maybe it's the impact of social media and so on, where people just say stuff, right? But you don't run a country and you don't conduct diplomatic relations simply because people say stuff, and you don't react to things simply because somebody's saying stuff. But then that's not how diplomacy is conducted. That's not how bilateral relations or multilateral relations are conducted. The relationship between Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago has always been an excellent one, remains an excellent one, and we've had no issues. In fact, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago had been scheduled to visit Grenada, and due to unforeseen circumstances with the schedule, she was unable to do so, and that was, I think, set for either late November or early December. As you're aware, I visited her soon after she formed the government, particularly in the areas of hydrocarbons. Our technical working group and their ministry have been working closely together to exchange information, to look at how, given their over a century worth of experience in the hydrocarbon field, to see how we can partner and get further assistance to them as we begin the work of developing the possibilities of our own hydrocarbon. We have been in discussions with them in terms of settling a formal loan agreement going back almost 20 years now from funds that the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago was gracious enough to advance to the government and people of Grenada coming out of Hurricane Ivan and Emily, so that we could, because it was, I guess, advanced in circumstances where there was immediate need for it, and the formalization of the terms and conditions of the advance that they've actually never been settled. And we've been working over the last couple of years with the first the PNM administration and now the UNC administration to settle that, so we can formally have it in our books and commence the repayment of the funds and so on. So it's important, I think, for the public to appreciate that you do not get emotive and reactive to every single thing that is in the media or every single thing that another prime minister or colleague may say. Each country is entitled, each leader is entitled to position their country as they see fit. If that means there's a divergence of views within CARICOM, so be it. It would be nice to always have consensus, but CARICOM isn't a single country. It is, 14 independent countries plus associate members. And if countries differ on foreign policy for whatever reason, they're entitled. That's the whole point of why you don't have one state. You don't have a federation, but you have, in a sense, a multilateral organization. So I don't. I always view things in a medium to long-term perspective, right? You always going to have bumps in partnerships. You always have difference of views, but that's not a reason to act as if the world is coming to an end and the CARICOM has come to an end, and yada yada yada. So certainly on a bilateral level, our relationship is excellent and remains on.
Two quick things because of one that you raised. Where are we with servicing that loan? Because you mentioned the loan in Trinidad, but I'm going to Petro-Caribbean now. Is this a debt that we have been servicing? Has the recent events disrupted that?
Oh, well, I will answer the question this way. We've not been able to service the debt, not because we don't want to or we don't have the means to service the debt. We've not been able to service the debt because there are sanctions against Venezuela, and you have to trade in US dollars to service the debt.
Okay, all right. And the other portion, I know that we had updated to the CBI program, so I just want to close off on that one. Have we instituted a residency requirement as part of our CBI program? And I'm citing this because there were sanctions, I think, in Netherlands on St. Lucia, because one of the things was the biometrics, second, no residency requirement, or at least no face-to-face engagement with officials from the country. But I'm asking specifically about the residency requirements with our CBI.
Actual law, as written, does make provision for residency requirement, right? I think we need to provide context because, you see, we need to understand the investment migration industry and why such a thing exists. The limitation on mobility, oftentimes arbitrary, based on sometimes colonial, archaic, even racist policies, oftentimes inhibit the ability of hardworking, decent people to move. Most of whom are sometimes based in the South or developing countries, India, China, Middle Eastern Asia, Eastern Europe, Russia, etc. And I'll give you a good example, right? We have significant shortage of skilled work in Grenada. If we're trying to source someone from India, for example, you may find India, a former Commonwealth country just like Grenada, English-speaking like Grenada, like the West Indies, great cricket-playing nation, and they can't get to Grenada because they need a visa, a simple in-transit visa somewhere, because the colonial pattern of flying still requires you to be routed through the north, and they simply can't get an in-transit visa, so they simply can't come to Grenada. And so many of the persons who find themselves through accident of birth, and I should emphasize that our programs don't even support stateless persons, right? So imagine those persons who through accident of birth are born in a place that's stateless. You don't even have an identity, right? So you can't travel, so you're out. We are actually dealing with people who are in states, but who through the accidents of birth, for example, are simply not able to move. So the reality is that in many instances, if you have a very draconian residency attachments to the investment migration process, well, there will be no investment migration, because how are they going to get the passport if they can't come to your country because they can't travel to it, right? And so people have to understand that there is a significant need, because oftentimes you have war, natural disasters. CARICOM is part of Grenada, but if CARICOM was a distinct and a separate island, for example, and it was devastated by the hurricane, and you have to move senior citizens, and you have to move other persons, school children. If this was an independent country next to us, we would have had to take them in. Their passports would have been lost and destroyed in the hurricane, right? They literally would have become climate refugees, right? So the reality is, it is those kinds of events where people are living in insecure environments sometimes, where despite how hard they work, they may be in political environments where the resources could be confiscated by the state with no compensation, where there's other forms of instability, perhaps crime, etc., where persons oftentimes are driven to try to find an alternative safe place. And especially if they have the financial means to do so that they can protect themselves and protect their family. it is not no terrorist financing and money laundering and all of that. And it's important for us as citizens of the country to understand that, because you see, if we're giving to this notion, people have to understand the investment migration industry to a large extent in Grenada and elsewhere in the last decade and a half has been the only source of foreign direct investment in those countries. You couple that, it has not impacted Grenada and most of the UACS countries, but for larger African countries and so on. You have to also couple that with the fact that USAID and other donor agencies have simply revoked any form of aid or support to those countries, right? And you have to be able to find ways for small developing countries to attract investment. Right? And that is why it's an investment migration in industry. It's a form of attracting investment. And this is not just a question of monetary investment. It's also expertise. It's also connection. It's also know-how to help drive economic development and to drive business. Right? And so we need to appreciate it. If you take in the case of Grenada, and you look at the quality of, say, a Six Senses hotel or Intercontinental which is being built, it is not just the money, it is the know, it is the imagination to bring all of this together and the daring to go to a part of the country hitherto which had no significant tourism investment, and to be able to drive economic activity and to diversify and to some extent save ecologically some of the challenges we face. Because if you have all of the hotels and so on concentrated in a 1 mile strip, you literally are putting that area under significant pressure, right? So it eases the traffic congestion in the grandlands in a certain area, right? It allows for economic development in the rural economies, etc. So we need to appreciate that, yes, we appreciate that there is some risk. There is always risk with everything you do, associated with the investment migration program. We are very clear that we are serious and deliberate about mitigating those risks, because our security is the security of our partners. But it's also important for us in circumstances where ask or requests of us are unreasonable, unfair, not based on data or facts, but on fanciful philosophies of always trying to paint the Caribbean and small developing countries as somehow involved in money laundering and anti-terrorist and terrorism financing and all these kinds of nonsense, for us to debunk these myths and show that there is no truth to these things, right? St. Kitts is perhaps what they call the grandfather of the investment migration industry. They've been doing this for almost 20, 30 years. Can they show where you could find 10 and 15 and 20 people with Kittitian passports that are terrorists? Or big fraudsters and so on. Of course, every now and then you may have some bad apple, but you have bad apples all the time, right? And you don't have to come through an investment migration scheme. There are people who saying they're trying to invest ordinarily and could be bad apples. So it's important. I've spent some time on this. So it's important for us to understand this. And I want to conclude in Grenada's case on one specific point. It is the same investment migration industry funds that have been used to pay international bondholders. Right? So when there was a windfall coming from the situation arising from Russia, we paid $75 million back from these same funds to the bondholders. And where do you think the bondholders are based? They're part of the Paris Club. It's the same Europeans. So it's the same creditors in the north. So it's important for us to appreciate that and to defend things that work for the Caribbean. I keep saying nobody's going to come and save us. Right? And okay, if we shut down the investment migration industry, where's the foreign direct investment coming from? Where's the money coming from to pay back these bond holders? Where's the money coming from to fuel the investment in the tourism sector? You have to find some imaginative and creative way to attract it, because they will tell you don't have scale, you're too small, you're too brown, you're too black, you're in a hurricane belt. Essentially, they are telling you don't matter. So everybody is talking about existential threat. We are constantly under existential threat, whether it's from hurricane, whether it's from geopolitical tensions, whether it's from a philosophy of dominating black, brown, or small island or small countries, whether it's from economic policies and practices that are inherently racist or meant to suppress or keep back small developing countries. We need to understand that. So if we don't come up with thinking out of the box economic development, bank and financing policies to fuel the development of our own people, well, I think they're saying about carriers of water and etc., that is what will be destined to become our worse. So it's important for us to appreciate those things. The case I'm making here, we've made that case clearly to our partners. We believe they understand that these are legitimate programs, that we are doing everything to mitigate the downside of the programs. That's why we have no difficulty with the biometrics. We have no difficulty with some residency requirement. We have no difficulty with a single regulatory body. We have no difficulty with international best standards. And I dare say, some of our due diligence is superior to that of our partners. And we've challenged them on some of those things. They will say they can't tell us their own due diligence process for security reasons and so on, and we respect that. But we are very transparent with ours. You know the international due diligence providers from, they're all from your countries. Right? You know the systems by which we review. You have extensive due diligence. The banks themselves conduct their own due diligence. If the banks say don't accept the money, the application never goes forward. Right? So in a sense, you have a 2 or 3 tiered, subtly in Grenada, checks and balances. You have the CBI unit that does its own checks. You have the international DD providers that do their own checks. You have the financial intelligence unit, right? You have the regional authority that does its own check that all of us send the stuff. Then you have the banks that do their own checks. So it's actually a miracle that people still persist after having to put through all of this, right? But it also tells you why the programs serve a legitimate needs from the point of view of an applicant. Because as I explained to you, it's not everybody who have the fortune that we have of being born in a place or in a country or in an island or in a state that is well regarded and allows people to travel and move free. There are many countries in the world where your citizenship simply denies you the ability to travel at all.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for those responses. Viewers, listeners, we are taking our first break and we'll be speaking things Grenadian and taking a look at 2025 and projections for 2026 when we return. Yes.
The Frequente Industrial Park is opening its doors with prime square footage available right now. Whether you are scaling up your production line or establishing new regional headquarters, we have the footprint you need ready for immediate lease. Our newly refurbished state-of-the-art facilities set a new standard, offering premium spaces designed for modern manufacturing, ICT, and service enterprises that demand excellence. With 24-hour security, property management support, and a location just minutes from the airport and the capital, GIDC Facilities isn't just a landlord. We are your partner in logistics and success. Secure your space in Grenada's flagship industrial hub today. GIDC Facilities, the foundation for your future.
Asian Spa and Wellness Cafe, nestled in the serene surroundings of Le Phare Bleu, Calivini Bay, St. George, is the perfect spot to unwind and relax after a stressful event or when you wish to spoil yourself in the most comfortable and relaxing atmosphere. They offer many different massage modalities, including thigh hammer, washer and cupping, signature thigh deep tissue massage, also facials to depuff and tighten pores, deep cleanse full body, hair and nail treatments and more. Take a walk down to the cafe for authentic Thai breakfasts and delicious traditional dishes. Choose from our special mixed drinks, both hot and cold. Opens daily. Visit Asian Spa and Wellness Cafe today, Le Phare Bleu, Calivini Bay, St. George, because you will not regret you did.
Go paperless with e-billing. Get your Grenlec bills straight to your email inbox faster and more convenient with myaccount.grenlec.com. Sign in to myaccount.grenlec.com where you'll be directed to the home screen. Under additional options and paperless billing, hit sign up. Enter the email where you'd like to receive your bills. Check the accounts you want, then click sign me up. It's that easy. Your bills now come straight to your email inbox. Switch to e-billing and put the power in your hands.
Are you thinking of where to shop this Christmas? Then look no further. The best place to shop is at Dominic Shopping Center, Guelph St. John. There you'll find everything you need. Name it, they have it. From household items, toys, decorative lights, appliances, portable AC units, cosmetics, hair and skin products, formal and casual wear, shoes, slippers and sandals, bed sheets, kitchenware, greeting cards and more. With 2 locations, Central and Depredine Streets, Guelph St. John. Call 444-9221 and 444-8804. The management and staff of Dominic Shopping Center wish everyone an enjoyable Christmas and a prosperous 2026. Dominic Shopping Center, the best in the West.
For when you need someone to help you to your feet, I'll be that beacon to your highest peak. I'll be right next to you, no, I will never leave. Come on, take my hands, we got everything we need. Cause you can look to me, whenever you're in need. Just call on me and I'll be on my way. I'll be by your side, never to divide. The light that shines our way. Wherever you road leads, we'll be right there with you. Wherever you road leads, we'll make your dreams come true. Next time, next time, next time, next day, oh.
Nexa Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We are with Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, and we're about to do some reflections, as it were, for 2025. Prime Minister, just in looking at your own Instagram posts, I noted that you highlighted some areas that you felt were accomplishments for the government in 2025. And one of the things that jumped out to me certainly was the introduction of the pension regime for employees. So what has enrollment been like? Who have been the ones who have been engaged to be part of this program?
Right, so the program, the pension, benefits all, what I would use this term loosely, non-established public workers. The established ones are those who, based on the free independence pension legislation, police, prison, etc., and who have established positions as public officers who currently benefit from the unfunded pension plan. And that unfunded pension plan is essentially, when you retire, you're depending on revenue collected from taxpayers to pay that pension to you. The pension, and so you have to be an established officer to be able to be on that pension plan. Unfortunately and regrettably, there were thousands, in excess of 3,000 plus officers who were not on that plan, and many of whom were on contract for service, contract off service, some form of PSC letter, some form of permanent secretary letter, some form of daily paid, weekly paid, unestablished, all various forms of contractual employments. There's some effect of which they were not getting, and on their retirement, any pension.
So they're ineligible based on that arrangement.
Yes. So the pension we've created allows all of these workers, for the most part, to be able to be part of a pension scheme where they contribute, the government contributes, and importantly, when the scheme was established, part service compensation, meaning the equivalent of the government's portion of the wages that should have been paid towards the pension, would have been backdated from the time they joined the government as an employee, and we would have paid that portion in for them. So there would have been no loss of benefits from a government perspective in terms of the contribution that we have to make. The plan is also open to statutory bodies as well, because there are many statutory bodies that are without a pension plan, or maybe just relying on the National Insurance Scheme Fund, and some of them have already begun to join.
Okay, so we've had statutory bodies signing on to the pension plan?
Yes.
Okay, any examples that you can share?
Off the top of my head, I believe TAMCC should be one of them. I believe Garfin should be another one. It was actually gazetted. I don't have the...
Okay.
But
all right.
it was actually gazetted.
And this would be from an employee's standpoint in addition to NIS benefits,
Yes.
because they were paying the NIS like every other employee and also paying into this.
Yes, that's correct. So it's in addition to the NIS pension.
And off the top of your head, do you know the percentages that we're paying as?
I think it's 5-5, but I can have the Department of Public Administration verify that.
Okay, all right, no problem. Reflection on healthcare.
Yes.
What would you say has been the major accomplishment on healthcare in 2025?
I think the quality improvement initiative that we've launched at the General Hospital, I think is one of the major ones. I mean, it's easy to talk about Project Polaris, and significant work is going on there. But I think in terms of addressing the immediate state of healthcare and the quality and the experience that one experiences at the General Hospital, I think focusing on the quality improvement and ensuring, because it will be a continuous process, and the rigors of that and the need to drive service delivery and service excellence is critical. And sometimes you may not see the immediate benefit because you have to do the foundation work, you have to do the practice in the dark, as they say, before you go out to light. But I mean, very basic things that were just simply not happening. Debriefing after an operation, patient identification, right? And that one particularly stands out to me because if you go perhaps to any other international hospital, you would see that is an absolute important thing, to make sure that you can identify your patient, to make sure that when you are doing your checks, you ask the patient their name, the date of birth, you reconfirm they are who they are, for simple reasons. If it's the wrong patient and you give the wrong medication, you're in trouble. So simple routine things that we may take for granted, ensuring that the hand washing practices and procedures are not just known but are visible, that the reminders are there, that they're followed, and that there's someone to enforce them. So these are some of the simple things that we're working on to make sure that we can begin to improve the outcomes. And I think you've seen some of the testaments from the healthcare practitioners who obviously are working in conjunction with Mount Sinai. And it's important for us to appreciate this has not been imposed by Mount Sinai. This is a collaborative effort between the Ministry of Health, the management team at the General Hospital, and Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is coming and going, but the practices have to be sustained by us at the Ministry of Health. So I think that is a one that I think is absolutely critical in terms of one of the things that we've begun to accomplish, and obviously we are going to continue doing so as we roll out into 26 and 2027. I just also want to mention the statutory transition team because it's not just medical practices that need to change. The entire infrastructure and structure of how healthcare is delivered and structured in Grenada needs to change. Having a Ministry of Health in a centralized location to treat with all of the HR issues within general hospitals and so on is just not effective. And the current public service apparatus for hiring and retaining staff is clearly not effective, because you can see we're bleeding nurses, we're bleeding doctors, they're leaving in mass, and although we've tried to stem the tide by offering additional benefits and so on, it is not just money. It is the entire HR system that frankly has been virtually non-existent. And so we have appointed a committee led by Mrs. Lucia Livingston-Andel. It includes other persons like Mrs. Gemma Bain Thomas, former Cabinet Secretary, the current Permanent Secretary in the Department of Public Administration, Mr. Damian Dolan from the Project Polaris team, and others, persons with HR expert, persons with finance expert, to help us begin this process of crafting out the policy, the legislation, the financial implications of the transition that would have to take place, so that by the time we get to Project Polaris, we would have been well on our way to have statutorized the hospitals, including the new hospital when it's built in Hopeville, so that we can have a modern HR financing approach to running our hospitals.
Is the philosophy, and I hear statutorization, but underlying that is appropriate management of our hospital services.
No, absolutely.
And is this something that we are going to outsource based on the present philosophy, or do we anticipate that a statutory body can hire in order to ensure the proper running of our hospital?
No, I think the idea of creating the statutory body, so that the statutory body, just like a NOASA, is going to be responsible ultimately for the management the hiring, the HR, the financing, the entire operation of the hospitals. That's the whole point of creating a statutory body. If they choose to outsource, and I'm using that word in inverted commas, or retain any particular consultant or consulting expertise or any of that, that would be a matter for them to determine when the time comes, based on the needs of the hospitals.
What else took place in support of our primary care? And we'll get to Project Polaris, but that's the big picture. But we can't have a modern tertiary facility like the Project Polaris is destined to deliver upon without solid primary and secondary care.
Yeah, well, I think, that's why I did not speak about Project Polaris. Right. I mean, so when I talk about quality improvement, I mean, the whole point of starting with the general hospital, unfortunately, because the bulk of the healthcare is driven through them, right, is because we want to be able to institutionalize practices that will redound to primary healthcare as well. So when we talk about things like hand washing routine, that is not just for the hospitals, it will be for the medical stations as well, right? It will be for primary healthcare facilities. When we talk about things like patient identification, it is intended that those things are driven right throughout the healthcare system. Because if you're making mistakes with who the patient is at the medical station, and then you have to refer them to the hospital, the same thing will happen. So I'm just giving that as an example. But I mean, there have been a number of initiatives that at the primary healthcare level that the team has focused on. So on an infrastructure perspective, we are working on upgrading of several of the primary healthcare facilities. So for example, in St. David's, the medical station is going to be refurbished. We're in the process of retrofitting the home that the government bought from the missions, the Sisters of Charity, in Malmont, so that we could relocate the medical station temporarily so that we could do significant upgrades. The same is happening in places like Sotes and so on. So the infrastructure in all of the primary healthcare facilities, we are beginning to tackle that, and we will continue doing so as part of the initiatives that we're looking at. We have been working a lot as well with many of the incoming missions to tackle some of the issues, whether it's from dental care to ophthalmology and so on and so forth. And that's part of ensuring that we can drive the initiatives in ensuring that primary healthcare is taken care of. But I think the crucial part of this, and I could probably also mention that there's been significant work in mental health as well, in terms of mental health community nurses and so on, to ensure that we can help service a lot of the persons who have mental illnesses at the community level at their homes, rather than always having to go into the psychiatric hospital at Monge. So that's some of those simple initiatives. Sometimes you won't see them, but they're impacting the persons who actually need the healthcare. But I think it's important that we've been talking a lot about this, right? Primary healthcare starts with us, right? And so basic things like oral hygiene and care, and the minister and his team have been working hard to reintroduce in schools issues like education on brushing your teeth, on providing fluoride and floss and so on. Because we believe those things, once the kids learn at primary school and secondary school how to take care of their oral health and their teeth, the dental visits become less critical. You probably will have less cavities. You'll also understand nutrition and so on, and what that means for you. So I think there's some issues which may not appear to fall under healthcare per se that are critical for us to address in our nutrition. And the Greener Food and Nutrition Council is going to have to continue playing a much larger role in this, because to a large extent, a lot of our ill health is driven by poor nutrition. And that includes excessive consumption of alcohol and other narcotics, lack of exercise, and eating of excessive amounts of the wrong types of food, salt, sugar, high starch diet. So you essentially have malnutrition, right? So a robust education campaign in all forms, because the television advertising and so on is powerful, the fried foods, the oil foods, all of those things is part of what we have to be able to address, because you see, if not, it will always be too little too late. It is always,
and when we go out, that's what is available, unfortunately.
Right, but that is part of the education and the cultural change that has to
You mentioned the excessive consumption of alcohol, and for quite some time we had the replacement of the Carlton home being on the table. Where are we with a facility for addicts?
Right, we're going to construct a facility for persons who are suffering from substance abuse in Maribo. We are optimistic that construction will start in 2026. As with all things pertaining to construction, you have to have designs, you have to have your bill of quantities, you have to have the procurement process, you have to select a contractor, and then you have to go through. This is something we committed to, and we are quite confident that work will commence in 2026.
And speaking of addictions, we were informed that you recognized gambling was a problem in Grenada, and you took on the leadership of a cabinet subcommittee to appraise where we are. Can you give us an update as to what's the status with that? I mean, the blast shops continue, the challenges continue. Where are we with it?
Yes, right. Well, I don't know if I've taken on the leadership of a cabinet subcommittee, but I think, yes, I do have significant concerns about the amount of domestic gambling that's going on in Grenada. And it is something that has to be addressed in a holistic way. Right? You see, our values matter. If people are left to think the only way in which they can exit the challenges, the financial challenges that they have is through gambling, then we are guaranteeing to them that they will never come out of it. Right? And so it is, I respect an individual's right to choose how to live their life. But I think it's important for our society to also have some consensus as to what our values are and what are demerit and merit goods. Gambling is a demerit good. Right? And gambling addiction, if one suffers from it, could be highly destructive. And unfortunately, in many instances, it is persons who are already of limited economic or financial means who find themselves gambling, and if the addiction takes root, could be quite destructive. Now, you may have benign games like a bingo and stuff like that, which I have no issues with. It's when we are dealing with incessant, repeated behavioral patterns where people don't care about their children, they leave their children home, they go on gambling, they spend hours in the gambling area without realizing 12 hours have passed, 14 hours have passed, then you have major problems. And so it is something that as a society we have to take a whole of society approach and to decide what are the best avenues or options. So maximizing revenue that may come from quote-unquote gambling activities or game of chance activities, while at the same time protecting the persons who are probably most vulnerable from the activities of gambling. I've always felt, for example, that if we had to encourage some of these things, they should be at an airport and seaport where people are passing time and where you're probably getting funds from tourists and visitors and so on that we could use. And at the same time, obviously things like sports betting and so on is widespread and international. So to me, we should be focusing on those kinds of things so that, again, you attract funds from non-citizens and from tourists and foreigners and so on into the country, rather than a situation where we are targeting persons who have lesser means or limited means in an almost wholesale and systematic manner, and extracting from them money that they already don't have, or that they could ill afford to lose. And then end up in a situation where their lives are made worse off, and then they're clinging on to this illusion that the next draw will be my draw, and so on. So it is something we need to address. And I will say this. I mean, we have to be honest. Is the gambling industry going to lead to dramatic improvements in the economic development and well-being and growth of the citizens of the country? I'm hard-pressed to find any country in the world where the gambling industry sustains a high level of economic activity or high level of development, especially if the persons who are gambling are the citizens of that country. It's one thing if large amounts of tourists come in and they bring their money and they lose it and leave it there. That's a good model. But it's another thing if it is the citizens of the country money that has been extracted, particularly in circumstances where if it's been extracted by an entity that is not from the country. So these are things we have to be mindful of.
Okay. Just chat a little bit with us in terms of how we are going to address, I'm still sticking on healthcare before moving on, the skills shortages that we have mentioned. I know that we have had agreements with Ghana and Nigeria for nurses and doctors, but these are stopgap measures. Yeah. So what's the sustainable plan to develop?
The sustainable plan is through education, through scholarship, enhancing or reformulation process that will allow us to invest in the citizens of the country. That will also allow us to encourage the diaspora to play a much more significant and meaningful and impactful role, and also to enhance and widen our recruitment reach. I think those are the three things, because obviously the education piece is almost a 5 to 10 10-year piece. So even if we ramp up the scholarships, even if we ramp up the investment student loans, now it will take us 5 to 10 years before persons are able to be in a position to serve. So it means in the meantime, yes, we are going to have to continue recruiting internationally. We are going to have to continue targeting our St. George's alumni. We are going to have to continue targeting
I heard the term investment student loans,
yes.
and I don't want that to pass the audience.
Right.
Are we moving to a regime that alongside a scholarship, there is a loan component that our citizens can access, probably through guarantee either by government or some other entity, so that there's increased access for their education?
The answer is yes. We are moving to that. We're also moving to a situation where when you get the scholarship, the scholarship will become a convertible loan if you don't hold up your end of the bargain. We have to appreciate medical education in particular is very, very expensive, perhaps one of the most expensive. And when the state funds your education to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have an obligation to come back and serve. And if you say, I don't wish to serve, then the state should be able to say, fine, pay the money back, because we need to educate another Grenadian who hopefully will serve. We don't want to get to the point where people are not serving, because the truth is we absolutely need the service, and because we have the capacity deficits. But you know, education is an investment. Whether it's made by the state, whether it's made by through your own means or your family means, it's an investment in yourself, and the return on investment invariably pays off 10, 15 times fold. So it's important for young persons to understand that. I recall giving my son a story about what one person may see as debt, I saw as an investment. So when I borrowed a loan to invest in myself, I could then therefore tell you, coming back, my salary went from say $10 to $50.
Right.
So it allowed me to service the loan that I made to get something extra. So the return on investment was worthwhile, and then thereafter you get further opportunities and so on. And people have to understand that you don't start where you want to end up. Where you want to end up is oftentimes far, far, far higher, far, far, far longer than where you started, and it's important for us to teach that so that young people understand the concept of deferred gratification, that you don't consume everything that you get immediately, that you save some, that sometimes you make sacrifices now so that you could be better off later on in life. And I think that is what really education is about. So we have to make sure people understand that.
Okay. NHI, can't leave healthcare without that one. Where are we?
No, so we are going to be proceeding with this. We've been seeking to work with the professor from the University of the West Indies who did some of the initial work on this. Obviously time has passed since then, so they had to update some of the data and so on. We expect that certainly within the month of January that the Ministry of Health will be providing us with a cabinet submission that we should be able to approve to move the matter forward. But we are committed to this because it will be critical as part of the financing arrangement for the operation of the Project Polaris hospital, because we need to make sure that Grenadians will be able to afford the healthcare that is provided at the hospital, and it has to be financed. Right. The model where we just have a taxpayer's budget is clearly not working, and we need to make sure that there's sustainable finance to ensure that the hospital is successful and that Grenadians can have access to the quality care they deserve.
Okay. If we're just to move on to housing, Project 500, if you can give us an update on Project 500.
Yes. And I would say to Grenadians, if you don't know about Project 500, you have an opportunity to go to Dunfermline, where 17 model homes more or less completed construction. There may be one or two that are outstanding. You can make an appointment with the Housing Authority of Grenada and the Project 500 team to view the homes. And there's also a website called Project 500 on the Housing Authority of Grenada, and there's been several ads and so on has been running about what Project 500 is. So essentially, the idea is to build as many Grenadian style homes as we coin them as much as possible, bearing in mind that there are severe limitations on land availability. The idea of building the 17 pilot homes initially was to test a number of things: the speed at which homes can be built, what sort of technology is best, particularly using new technology. Is there an opportunity for us to green the home so that we could use renewable energy, etc., build them in such a way that the materials that are used can keep the homes much cooler, so there's less need for air conditioning, and see if we can reduce the price of construction, because that's one of the major challenges that makes, obviously, most of what we use in construction is imported, and that therefore makes the cost significant. The team, as I said, has more or less completed the construction of most of the homes. We are waiting on them to give us a final sort of wrap-up on data pertaining to cost, time, type of material, type of technology used, crucially feedback from the public. That's where we want people to go, which homes people like, which homes they don't like. And then we expect certainly within the month of January for price ranges to be attached to the homes, because that is crucial. It's one thing to like the home, it's another thing to be able to afford it. And then we get that feedback. We then intend to move to what will be the next phase. And the next phase really then would be to in fact construct the homes en masse and to crucially partner with the private sector.
Where is it would be I need to have land in order
Right, so that's one option. So there are a number of options, 2 or 3 options that we are looking at. One, greenfield sites owned by the government. Greenfield sites owned by private persons who may be interested in partnering with the government. So for example, you have a large 10, 15 acres of land and you're interested in using it for land development, then we would encourage people to come forward. We will seek to get a partnership with them to see how we could use the land to build the homes. Obviously a commercial deal will be done. If person has the individual lots, then we are also prepared to work with them to have a model of the homes built on those lots. Now, of course, you have to own the lot, and the lot has to be capable of being built up, right? Because our terrain is quite steep in many instances. So that model is also a model that we're looking at.
Okay, all right. So we're at the stage now rehousing that in January there could be an announcement because we have price and we know the
well, yeah, I would say to be safe probably early February. I think what we would be looking at is to indicate then whether we will proceed. For example, right next to where the lots were built, I think there's a potential keeping the lot sizes moderate to get 72 lots, which means the potential to build 72 homes. Okay. Now in the context of Grenada, that's a significant number of homes, and if you did that by 3, 70 by 3 is what, 210? So basically on the assumption that you have an average of 3 persons in a home, you're looking at housing for potentially 210 persons. But obviously before we do so, we need to get a sense of there are 5 or 6 models. Right? We're not going to build 5 or 6 models. Right. We are probably going to be narrowing it down to 3 models because either the price range is something that the people are most in demand for. People actually find this particular model pleasing, and etc. And then you have to determine whether it's 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms that you're building. So obviously the idea. So you may end up with, let's say 70. You may end up with 20 of a particular model, 20 of the next, 30 of another. And the idea then would be to give the particular supplier the contract, obviously, to build these particular homes. But this is crucial. Before the homes are built, we want to make sure they're sold. Right. Right. And so the financing sector, the credit unions, the banks are going to be a critical part of this, because what we would obviously want is a pre-approval for persons to be able to buy the homes, because this is the average cost, this is the lot size, this is what it look like, and you have an actual model that you can go and look at. Right. So obviously if this person is if you can get 25 people pre-qualified, then it gives us a position to say to the contractor, okay, the financing is available because the banks or the credit unions will provide it. Obviously that's to build the homes, but you need to put in the infrastructure, and that's a significant cost as well, the land, the utilities, etc. So the idea behind the Project 500, which we always said, was to partner with the private sector and other stakeholders, and I'm repeating this, essentially the government doesn't want to be in a position where the government is building the homes. What the government wants to be in a position is essentially is the project manager through the Housing Authority and the Project 500 team. We want the financing institutions to finance. We want the suppliers and the contractors to build. If there's a role for government, it will probably be infrastructure, because obviously that's public infrastructure, and that's the basic role of the government. And then we will seek to see how we best can incentivize, whether it's through some policy that deals with concessions, or whether that's a policy that helps the bank feel confident that the government is indeed a partner, and therefore they can fund this, having the assurance that the infrastructure will be built, etc., so that the value of the security goes up once they've invested in this. And that's why we announced the creation of the $50 million fund in the budget, because we wanted to signal to the private sector that we are serious. Right, and now we will look to have a segregated fund created to help drive things like the infrastructure and to help support the unleashing of funding from the private sector to make sure that these homes get built.
Project management is critical for delivery. Yes. A critical part of project management is communication. That seemed to be lacking in a number of areas. So government has a significant number of projects on, but we seem not to know as the public where we are in terms of timelines for delivery, where we are in keeping with budget, etc. Chat with us a little bit as to whether this is an area that you believe, based on the government projects that you have, an area for improvement, and work into that conversation our Cliff project, road project.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, there's always areas for improvement, but I think I'd probably say more than any administration that I've experienced in my lifetime. I think we try to be as accessible and update the public as much as possible. The challenge is it's I think sometimes people are easily distracted. We have town halls, we have DMs with PMs, you have various ministries with their communication departments, with their websites, with their own press releases and so on, and sometimes perhaps too much is going on. So sometimes it's difficult to in a sense get it focused. But I certainly have no quarrel with saying that there perhaps is a need for more deliberate updating of what is taking place. So where we are with the Cliff project, as you appreciate, we've struggled in terms of the delays. With the Cliff, and I think the television might be showing some aspect of it. Obviously, we were hoping to have made the road motorable, as in you can at least drive on it by the end of the year. That unfortunately didn't happen because finally at the end of the year we got some rain, and then there's one portion of the road where the backfilling is yet to be completed. And unfortunately, the backfilling is time consuming simply because you have to fill at a certain layer, stop, compact, and test.
Right.
And if the test fails, then obviously you have to redo it. And so that is, in particular, has delayed that part of the ensuring that the road could be motorable. We anticipate that once the backfilling is complete, and I'm hoping that this could happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, then we'd be in a position where the actual paving of the road, asphalting could continue. This is actually showing, in this case, some of the sidewalks that have been built. So I'm cautiously optimistic, since I'm not the contractor, not the consultant, that by the end of January into February, the road should be motorable, assuming we don't get any rain on that portion that needs to be compacted still to make sure that traffic can flow. The next stage is really to have the asphalt tested. That is critical because if the asphalt mix is not appropriate, it can fail and easily. So we are waiting on the contractor to provide the sample so we can test that, and once that happens, then we expect approval is granted and that asphalting should commence.
Let me just chat a little bit again, just circling back to, yes, town halls, DM with PMs, etc. We've also seen the weekly press conferences being cancelled. Previous administrations held this. Is this, as part of the communication problem, something, communication strategy, something that you will contemplate? And if not weekly, monthly or otherwise?
Yeah, I think there are two issues with the press conference. I'm happy to do the press conference. Media was not showing up. I mean, I think it's I call it long COVID, where people would send, it was all virtual. So I would come up to Parliament building or wherever, the ministerial conference room, and it would just be cameras. It would be our cameras and persons appearing at best all virtually. I've also had press conferences where after I provided the press conference, I was told we're providing too much information. We actually told her that they needed time to study information, to be able to ask questions on what was provided. So I didn't want to put myself in a position where I feel I was talking to myself, right? So I'm happy to do the post-cabinet sort of weekly, it doesn't have to be post-cabinet, but weekly press conference on myself but we also need the media to be present. I mean, I can't do their work for them. And so I'm happy if they're going to show up, if we invite them to the press conferences, that they will come. And part of that is from time to time we do radio station rounds. We partly to demonstrate obviously our willingness to be accessible and to answer the questions or to provide information that the media or the public may have. But as I said, there's always room for improvement, and I'm certainly happy to, within reason, to have as many press conferences as is necessary to clarify or provide updates on any government project or so.
Okay. All right. PM, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll speak about our Blue Economy initiatives moving forward. Sure. All right. So viewers and listeners, see you shortly.
A common theme woven into the very fabric of human history. From ancient wanderers to modern explorers, our instinct to move, to seek something greater, and to grow has always driven us forward. Imagine a journey into pathways of boundless opportunities and endless possibilities. A collective future where the vibrant rhythms of the Caribbean, rich culture, and welcoming community create unforgettable experiences. Beyond citizenship by investment, we believe in our collective investment of time, resources, and energy that fosters innovation, creates jobs, and enriches lives, driving the growth of an entire nation. The Investment Migration Agency Grenada boasts over a decade of exceptional service and remains committed to guiding you toward global mobility and economic freedom through investment. Your journey becomes our shared story of progress and prosperity. This is an invitation to be part of something greater, something enduring. Begin your journey at imagrenada.gd. IMA Grenada. Unlock the possibilities.
Go paperless with e-billing. Get your Grenlec bill straight to your email inbox faster and more convenient with myaccount.grenlec.com. Sign in to myaccount.grenlec.com where you'll be directed to the home screen. Under additional options and paperless billing, hit sign up. Enter the email where you'd like to receive your bills. Check the accounts you want, then click sign me up. It's that easy. Your bills now come straight to your email inbox. Switch to e-billing and put the power in your hands.
Are you looking for a reliable, affordable, and customer-friendly pharmacy? Look no further than Hills and Valley Pharmacy, the nation's leading healthcare products and services provider. We are committed to serving you at convenient locations. Find an extensive and affordable selection of prescription and over-the-counter drugs and medical supplies at Church Street, Hillsborough, Carriacou, Jubilee Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, near the bus terminal, and Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George. Our committed team is always available to offer valuable assistance for managing your health and wellness. Discover the additional benefits of our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street and our Medcare Center on Grenville Street, where we provide in-house physiotherapy, massage therapy, doctor consultations, and eye care services. Our commitment is to satisfy all your healthcare needs, including competitive prices, loyalty rewards, and special discounts for seniors. Contact us at 435-6904 and WhatsApp 535-4734. Choose Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Remember, your health is our business.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We have with us our very special guest, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. Prime Minister, the blue economy. And before we get into the blue economy, because I know it's a new term, January 1st has passed, and we are aware that there has been now, I guess, post-January 1st, instituted an embargo on the exportation of our yellowfin tuna to the U.S. Is there any updates that you can give us on that? I know that we did some legislative work, but where are we in getting that reversed?
Right. So in December, the NOAA opened its portal to allow us to reapply. The reapplication has been made, and it is being considered by NOAA. We anticipate, all things being equal, that we will get a response from them during the month of January. And we are cautiously optimistic that we believe we've met all of the legislative, regulatory, and technical requirements that are necessary and hopefully should satisfy more to allow for the restriction on the importation of fish to be lifted. So that is in essence where we are. Okay, and that's excellent news. And did they give a feedback as to what the review timelines are like or not? No, I'm saying January because I think that's kind of the sense we have. Obviously, we recognize that, and I think they recognize that obviously the restriction went into force on the 1st of January. Mm-hmm. So we believe they're acting in good faith, and both our technical and diplomatic efforts have been relentlessly pursuing this issue because we recognize the significant importance it is to the fishing community and exporters of fish, and we hope that all things being equal, that we will get a favorable response, as I said, in the month of January.
Okay. Do we have any safety nets for our fisher folk in the interim, or are we dependent on a speedy turnaround from NOAA?
Well, at this stage, I don't want to say we have safety nets in the interim because we need to see what the response is from NOAA, and having seen that, then it will put us in a position to know if we need to get to safety nets at all. Obviously, we would hope that we don't have to get to safety nets.
Fair enough. One of the investments that we are hearing for the fishing industry is the Melville Street Fisheries Port project. When do we anticipate there will be some commencement on that?
Yeah, it's conceptual at this stage, so we don't think it is likely to happen in this calendar year, because any sort of port project will require significant, especially coastal, significant engineering. And then those things take a while for building. The challenges, as you obviously recognize, and I think most Canadians recognize, is that we've got large tuna boats and other vessels anchored on the Carinae that is causing significant damage to an already very frail infrastructure on the Carinae, together with a lot of other things that we'd prefer not to see happening there. So it is something that has to be addressed, and hence the reason why we are looking at that as a possible alternative.
Okay, I guess some of us is hopeful that in 2026 we'd have seen the movement of those trawlers from the
Well, to be honest, I'm going to say this quite deliberately. The Port Authority should have moved the trawlers a long time ago, and instructions have been given for this to happen. My view has been sought on the matter. I have made it clear the boats should not be there and should be moved. And you see too often people blame politicians for things that has nothing to do with politicians. The Port Authority is responsible for the port and for safe passage and harbour. This administration has never given permission, has never suggested, acquiesced in these boats being there. So those who have the power to act should act.
Speaking of movement, Port Highway has become an eyesore. We understand that people are actually living in some of the structures along Port Highway. Will we see any movement there in 2026?
Well, again, the Planning and Development Authority had begun the process of removing illegal structures along our roadways, and I'm yet to be provided with an explanation as to why it appears to have ceased or stopped. And again, it's important for us to appreciate that when statutory bodies are empowered in law to act and to protect roadways, public safety, public property, and they don't do so, and there is no policy directive saying otherwise. In fact, the policy directive is encouraging you to exercise your statutory powers and authorities in the interest of the public. Then that's part of the challenge we face. So for me, you have a port that is obviously active. Persons are coming to the port, and yes, they need to buy food or buy drinks, which essentially seems to be what is operating there. Is that the only options? I don't think so. And so it is part of what happens when we allow a culture of indifference to permeate. It gets to the point where it becomes intractable, and people essentially engage in inertia, and nobody wants to do anything because they're either afraid of some sort of, I don't know if they call it political backlash or public opinion or whatever the case, or fighting on the small man or whatever the usual thing is. But we have to at least make the effort to be a law-abiding and orderly society and address whatever issues or support people may need to be able to earn a living or to ply their trade in a decent, fair, but a manner that also doesn't cause significant public disruption or isn't an eyesore. Right. And that's part of the challenge, and these are things we have to speak about in a respectful, engaging manner with the persons or stakeholders who are impacted, not just sit on social media and run off our mouth and talk and so on, because obviously there are persons who probably are genuinely earning an honest living there. And the question is, what would be the alternative accommodations that we can make for them, rather than just ranting and raving. So this is part of the challenge that we have in a society in terms of how we address issues rather than just talking.
Okay.
To be in a position to make sure we can be fair to everyone and find the right solutions.
Getting back to the blue economy, we're informed that there is earmarked to be established a coastal management unit. What will be the focus of this unit?
Well, if you just sail around Grenada, you would see that there are a lot of wrecks. There are a lot of boats anchored in our waters, seemingly with no owners, that sit there for years. We have to be very careful as to whether or not a lot of the yachts are simply dumping feces, etc., into our water. I've seen sewage showing up on beaches in Lansapine, Prickly Bay area, True Blue, etc. So it's vital for us to actually be able to enforce the marine and ecological laws that put into protecting the environment. It is vital also for us to be able to actually earn revenue from the presence of craft within our waters, and it's vital for us to help, in particular, encourage the private sector to provide some of the infrastructure that is required to support the presence of boats and so on in our waters without destroying the seabed. And so that's one of the critical things. We also have our marine protected parks and areas, and if you don't have any sort of enforcement in place, then people are going to disregard those things. And we started off quite well. We've fallen back a bit, and we need to ramp that up again, because again, if we have parks and it's an opportunity for tourists and so on, then we need to be able to earn revenue. The tours and so on need to be conducted by well-trained personnel who understand the need to protect the sensitive areas that we are protecting and so on. So that's just some of the things that they will be focusing on.
Okay. What would you say is the most important investment that the government will be making within the blue economy in 2026 as we look to open up this particular revenue stream and area in our economy?
Well, it's a tough question, and it may not appear to be related to the blue economy strictly, but I think certainly for 2026, the most significant investment is the purchase of an offshore Coast Guard vessel to the tune of in excess of $20 million US. Because ultimately, if we are not able to protect and safeguard our territorial waters and our exclusive economic zone, then the entire concept of the blue economy falls apart. So this vessel, I'm told, should have the capacity to be at sea uninterrupted for as much as 6 months.
Okay.
Should be able to hold a significant number of crew and seamen, and that would allow for persons to be at sea for that length of time, and should give us a significantly enhanced capability to be able to patrol and safeguard our marine environment, both from a crime, public safety, narcotics, drug, arms running, but also crucially from other illicit activities like unwanted persons who might be fishing in our waters. Also to enhance our capacity to respond to natural disasters, because with a craft like that, if we do have hurricanes, we could move it and then have it come back in. That's critical for us, because you would have seen in Carriacou and Petit Martinique in particular that we got support from such a similar craft from the RSS and our brothers and sisters in Barbados and Antigua and so on. And that is critical, because if we can't protect, as you know, we have a lot of bays, a lot of beaches, and I think added to that with drone capability, the RGPF has a drone team, and we've made some significant investment in excess of $1 million in advanced drones that allows us to be able to deploy them and to monitor the sea as well as land. I think those things are going to make a significant difference in terms of.
Are we going to see a professional Coast Guard unit? And I'm not calling the members of the Coast Guard unprofessional, but a pullout of the Coast Guard unit. I mean, in some places, Coast Guard fire services are independent of the.
No, we don't need them to be independent of the RGPF. We are too small, and our resources are too limited to have a separate Coast Guard unit. I think our forefathers in their wisdom constructed this in such a way that the RGPF, the Coast Guard falls under the RGPF. That will remain the case. Naturally, the skills required for the Coast Guard are specialized skills, as many other police departments, RRU, SSU. A lot of the technical work with crime fighting, it requires specialist skills, and you have to be trained for it. But we think our Coast Guard men and women are already doing excellent work. What we need to do is support them by giving them the tools, more training, and the equipment and the infrastructure to do their jobs properly.
Okay. As we look at the blue economy, I've heard it proffered that if we, rather than have a ministry, or there ought to be a Ministry of Marine Affairs that encompasses Port Authority just because of the critical role and interplay between the two. Is this something that has been contemplated or not? As Port Authority falls under the Ministry of Finance and is a statutory body?
Well, I mean, we have not discussed it, but I'm sure it will come up as we build out the blue economy to see, whether the port is best suited for this. But we need to distinguish between the port and the blue economy. The port is, in simple terms, a simple landing point for the entry and exit of goods into a country. And to a large extent, it is driven by revenue. Hence the reason why it falls. And obviously, in our case, because we depend heavily on duties, particularly import duties, the port, the customs, that's sort of the rationale, I would say, for the Ministry of Finance from a financial point of view. I think from a technical point of view, in terms of the port itself, I mean, outside of the port itself doesn't do anything in terms of the blue or the marine economy or anything like that. And so whether or not it should be there, it could always be debated, but I don't know it will add one way or the other any significant difference in terms of the delivery of port services themselves.
Okay. Education. What would you say was the highlights in 2025 and what can we look forward in 2026?
Well, I think in 2026 we can certainly look forward to us continuing a lot of the policies, particularly having greater focus on developing the youth, I call it the Youth Skills Transformation project, focusing on the centers of excellence that we wish to establish, one for hospitality, significant transformation of the Maribor agricultural, I don't want to use the word farm school, I'm going to be specific and say agricultural school, the furniture making shop currently in St. Patrick, to transform that into a skills learning center. We have to decide whether the site is going to be appropriate or not, and continuing to work on the establishment of a marine school. Those things are critical. We expect we've already retained a consultancy firm made up of Canadian universities to help us with this. This is significant because I think all where you go, we are talking about a mismatch of no skills from our young men and women exiting our education system to the significant demand for skills, including soft skills. So that is a critical issue. A continued focus on teacher training, and in particular ensuring that we address the significant challenges in math is something that we are going to really, again, focus on and proceed with. That is critical, because if we don't address this math challenge, we're not going anywhere, even when it comes to the skills that we're talking about. Of course, we were able to introduce on a significant scale Form 1 and Form 2s the books to distribute them throughout the secondary schools to Form 1 and Form 2 students at no cost to the students and the parents, with the significant software and the books already loaded into this. We think this is a significant investment in our students, both to bring them into the digital age at a very early stage, and to, their skills that we take for granted, the ability to type. The ability to type is as basic a skill now as the ability to write. Yes. Right, and so ensuring that our students understand that in a very formal way is a simple thing, but it's critical. If you can't type, you can't function in the digital and electronic age. So I think that has been a major accomplishment of the Ministry of Education. I also want to emphasize, because it's 2024 into 2025, coming out of the situation in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, we were able to have schools reopen in September of 2024, almost seamlessly all the way into 2025 in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. In fact, I've had little or no complaints about this, and this is part of what happens. You see, when things go well, you just don't hear anything about it. But when things go terribly, you hear everything about it. So I think 24 into 25, the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs and the Ministry of Education deserve significant commendation for the work that they've done in making sure that our children's education was not disrupted in any significant way by Hurricane Beryl. And bear in mind, the students who attend the T.M. Marshall Community College from Carriacou were brought down to Grenada. And we agreed to continue the program, not just for the 1 year after the disruption, but to continue it for the second year in terms of helping to fund the education in Grenada, provided with laptops, etc. So these are significant accomplishments in the face of significant challenges. We also on the infrastructure front in education, have made significant strides with the commencement of construction of several schools, including the St. David's Catholic Secondary School, which has been long in coming and has been in the pipeline for a long time. I went to the site on Saturday, and enormous work is taking place already, and the work by the contractor is quite impressive. And they've assured me that they're on course. In fact, they said they're ahead of the schedule, which is not a common occurrence in Grenada. And they're on course to, all things being equal, to have the school ready by January or February of 2027.
Okay. Speak to us as to how your government will be leveraging scholarships as part of our sustainable development plan.
Well, I think the Ministry of Education is actually in the process of creating an entirely new or revised scholarship policy. In fact, it's been presented in draft form a few times to the Cabinet, and we've asked them to go back to consider other factors that they did not consider. For example, in particular, Project Polaris. Because if we're going to make that kind of significant level of investment, we want our scholarship policy to be able to address the jobs that the project will, not construction jobs, but the actual operational jobs that the project will necessarily have to have,
right,
and to ensure that our scholarship policy aligns with this. So this is essentially what we want to be able to do, to identify. We will not be able to address every single need or every single gap, but some of the critical gaps, and those where there are significant numbers, to make sure that we create a scholarship policy that aligns with that. So if we recognize that the marine sector, the blue economy, is an area for significant potential growth, and where there's already significant demand for skills that we simply can't meet, then our scholarship policy should be aligned to suit that. If we recognize that in the tourism and hospitality, because tourism is an enormous part of our GDP, that we are still taking the jobs with the least level of pay and remuneration, then our scholarship policy should drive towards making sure that more and more of the mid-management, supervisory, top management jobs are taken by Greenage, and so our scholarship policy should reflect that. If we recognize that there are, I don't want to use the word basic, but you know what the complaints are from people in the construction industry? No drivers for SL trucks, no heavy equipment operators. I met a young lady at the site of the St. David's Catholic School on Saturday, Ms. George, and I want to take the chance to shout out and say congratulations. She's a heavy equipment operator. And I spoke with her. She did a 6-month course in Trinidad, came back, found employment with Range, and now she's with Reno Construction. Those stories need to be told. And she said to me she was very proud because she went to St. David's Catholic Secondary School. Yep. She was very proud to now be in a position to help build the new school for the next generation of students who will be going to St. David's Catholic Secondary School. That's the type of scholarship policies. Our scholarships should be anchored in those sort of areas, rather than and I'm saying this openly, rather than people just going to study pointless subject matters. That is not going to give you a job. But that has no bearing on the real demands and needs of our society. And I'm not putting this down, but a lot of people are going to do psychology degrees. But are you going to get work? Are you going to make a career out of it? So we also need to help guide our young people in terms of what the jobs are actually available, and make sure that you could sometimes do things as a hobby, but you need to live. You need to have a career. You need to be able to take care of yourself. So it's important for us to ensure that our scholarship policies align with the actual needs of our community. Okay.
Prime Minister, it's just about time for us to close off, but I have to ask you about this one. We celebrated 2 years ago our 50th anniversary of independence, and I know you are big on nationalism. We are, well, on that day, so I'm going to just give the background, you came in a white suit and slippers with your red, green, and gold embroidered and sash, and that attracted quite a bit of commentary. Since then, you've gotten lots of compliments on your African garb that you have worn from time to time, but we have seen no movement, certainly no movement in the public sphere towards a national dress, whether semi-formal or formal, so that it can reflect our full Grenadian heritage. And I'm deliberately saying Grenadian heritage, not African, because we're not merely African. The Nayaks and the Budlas and the Japas would oppose that. But just reflect our Grenadian heritage. Where are we 2 years post our 50th anniversary of independence, with establishing a national dress, formal and informal, or semi-formal, that we can proudly wear on national occasions?
I don't know that I can answer, and I'm not so sure that I committed to having a national, wear established. But I think it is something that has been raised from time to time by the Ministry of Culture, and I have certainly no issue with supporting it. The question is, how are you going to determine that? You would obviously need the designers and the creatives to come up with a concept that is then perhaps subject to public input, public scrutiny, and that we can agree upon. I'm only dressed like this because I notice when I come on your show, you're dressed this way.
I only put on ties for Prime Minister's Prime Minister.
So I changed from my African garb just to accommodate suiting me, which I was wearing.
And probably, and probably next year, we probably can be wearing something that we have agreed is Grenadian.
Well, next year is in 2027. I don't think we'd be able to pull that off in time for 2026. But I think it's actually a good initiative that we can certainly galvanize our creatives into doing, and we can look at, what are all of the aspects of our threads of history: European, Amerindian, African, Asian, primarily Indian, and to see, how we can come up with something that takes from all of them and preserves a Grenadianness that we can all be happy with. So I'm sure the Minister of Culture and his team and advisor Wolanda Roman and others will be quite keen to get our creatives involved in doing something like this.
All right. I allow you closing comments.
Well, no, I want to thank the public for the continued support and trust in myself and my colleagues who've been given the opportunity to govern the country. I also want to say special congratulations to the men and women of the RGPF who were promoted today. I think about 179 of them, if I'm correct, one of, if not the largest promotions in the history of the RGPF. This is the third promotion, I think, in 3.5 years under 3 different commissioners. I'm sure there are those who are disappointed by the fact that their name was not called in this round, but as I said, there will be further opportunities, no doubt. The RGPF itself is going through significant transition, significant improvement. We are committed to improving the infrastructure. We're committed to improving the tools, the equipment, the technology that is used. We're committed, and we've shown that by our actions in improving the terms and conditions of service of our lawmen and women. And so I want to congratulate the Commissioner and his team. He's not been in the job very long, but I am happy to publicly say on record that in my dealings with him and in my observations, that he's done an amazing job, him and his management team, and we have every confidence that they will continue to do so. We want to thank them for keeping Grenada a safe place. They have had a phenomenal record in crime solving. I want to say in particular congratulations to the team at the Criminal Investigation Department. We obviously want them to solve less crime. And so it's important for us to emphasize that as a society we still have to work on some of the underlying issues that may in particular push our young men to want to engage in criminal activity. So that is something we have to be mindful of. But I attended the ceremony. It was quite clear to me that the men and women were quite happy and pleased. So again, I just want to say congratulations to them.
Prime Minister, thank you so very much for joining us at this beginning of the year, setting us up on the right footing, as I would say. It's an absolute pleasure. And on behalf of the team of Beyond the Headlines, we wish you well in your governance of Grenada and the difficult decisions that you would have moving forward towards the sustainable development of the country. Recognize heavy is the head that wears the crown. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And to you, viewers and listeners, absolute pleasure as per usual having you as part of this evening's program. It is with you and because of you we are able to have successful programs. So we look forward to being with you again in the next 6 days, 22.5 hours. Take good care. Good evening all.